I think a pivotal time in my life was when I was 10 years old. And I guess I'm gonna rewind a little bit because there was these lessons that actually shaped how I am today. The reason why that age, I remember it a lot, is because at the point of 10, after 10 years old, I wasn't raised by both of my parents. This is actually a story that not many people know about me. I guess I never get too deep to talking to people about my childhood, my upbringing. My life takes a turn. I have these lessons. Now my parents are split up. My dad goes and does 5 years in state prison, gets deported. It was obviously like a turn, like left field. So then I'm being raised now by a single mom. So I think that's a lot of where my hustle came from. And then I remember I saw my mom. She had to get like 2 jobs. My sister, who was a teen at that time, she had to start working too. To me, like everything was changing, and all of a sudden we were in survival mode, right? Because this home that was with 2 parents, stable, there's routine. All of a sudden you have a single mom, survival mode. Your sister's having to work, me and my brother having to stay home on our own. Well, like try to ask for the bare minimum. So I think that's kind of what I started, I guess that shaped me in the way of, okay, there has to be more. There has to be more. That it has to cost this much work for it to not be enough. I think that's when my mind started running wild. Like, how can, people get more out of life, right, than the traditional ways? So
Xochitl, I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and being on here. I've been very grateful to work alongside of you last year for like 2 months or so. And I've seen a lot of the inspiration that you brought, a lot of people, a lot of the motivation that you had around your team and around yourself. People don't see behind the curtains or behind the scenes of what it actually takes to do what you do. My first question, this is a question that I always like to ask in the beginning of each episode, is give me some foundation of your backstory, your life story. I know you're on a big mission and we've talked about this a couple of times, but what led you to this mission? Give me your backstory.
So I guess, first off, thank you for having me, Isaac. I know we had to reschedule a couple of times, but first and foremost, I guess getting down to the foundation of who Xochitl is, I guess it all starts obviously since I had memory. You saw Xochitl as a little girl. She's a first generation Mexican American. I was born in California and started grade school over here in El Paso, in Horizon actually. And I think as long as I have memory, I can remember always wanting to challenge things, right? From the beginning, like always trying with my dad, which was 100% Mexican, didn't speak English. Spanish was my first language actually, and I can recall since I was younger trying to trade him like $1 for pesos, but I always was trying to get the best bargain. So that's what I remember also, or like in school, right? Always trying to challenge is why the colors and not why can I not use it to color a map if it's in a crayon box? So as long as I've had memory, I'm always like trying to challenge things or norms as they are and trying to find alternative ways that usually people don't look out to, or simply define the norms, right? What society places on you. So that's kind of how I was since I was young. I guess fast forward a little bit, in high school and stuff like that, I've always been athletic, been active, a mix of an extrovert and an introvert, probably about 70% extrovert and 30% introvert when it's time, to kind of wind down. And I have, I consider myself very energetic. I like to deal with people a lot. I think people are great. I don't believe that there's necessarily bad people. I simply think that people have different beliefs, right? And sometimes it's hard for if you and I are having a discussion, for me to understand what your belief is because I'm too busy about mine. So that's where my introvert part comes out, because I talk to a lot of people. So every now and then I just have to go home and relax. But that's kind of what shaped me since being younger, being very curious. Like always, I was that kid that's always like, why? So that's kind of like my core, my foundation in itself.
I super agree with that, because I'm always telling myself, and I'm always telling everybody around me, is that nobody's ever perfect. Like, there's no such thing as perfectness. The question I have before that, though, is you talked a little bit about your parents, and were your parents people who were in business or things like that, as far as like running their own business? Did you have that DNA of an entrepreneurial DNA?
No. So my dad, he was a mechanic, and a very good one at that, from what, I've heard of, people he worked for. But it's like your typical, labor, right? My mom, she still is in home health industry, but at that moment, it's 8 to 5. I remember like every morning my mom had to make my dad's food, his waters, his everything, his lunch for the day. When we would get home from school, we would have to clean. My mom gets home, she does dinner. My dad gets home and, he sits at the table that we have to go and serve him first, like traditional Mexican family, even to that extent, where the man gets served and everything from the beginning. So it's just culture, right? Which I appreciate it. My parents were just regular 8 to 5 people. They migrated here at that. So I did not have that notion. I was just always challenging, why, curious. And I think I don't know if I was born with it, or I just asked too many questions and went down a rabbit hole, and I'm here now, right?
I like what you mentioned, because a lot of the times I like how you mentioned being a traditional, we're traditional Mexicans. We have that traditional lifestyle. A lot of the times, what I've been seeing from our previous guests and from just in the city that we live in a lot, is that we tend to not believe in ourselves a lot, because in the Hispanic culture that we live in, or in the families that we grew up in, a lot of the times we get that denial that we can't be something bigger than what we think we can be. Give me your perspective on that, as far as, growing up Latina in the Hispanic culture, and how kind of that was for you.
So I mean, given the example that my parents were giving me, where, the husband and wife, and when the husband gets home, like his word is what goes. And there was not much, I guess, substance to the like future in like 5 to 10 year planning, but there was a lot of self-worth that was instilled in us, but we still grew up by the norm. But I think a pivotal time in my life was when I was 10 years old, right? And I guess I'm going to rewind a little bit, because there was these lessons that actually shaped how I am today. And I remember clear as day, my dad, he considered himself like a person of nature. Like he did not like medicine. So those were kind of like my learnings, right? Mis enseñanzas, como dicen. Like it was like no medicine, plants, you respect nature. You do not even like step on an ant, because they are, insects. They're living things. And I remember every now and then, because we lived in Horizon, he used to be like, okay, kids, get in the car. We're going to go off-roading. So we would go do this like catch and release exercise. And we would go look for snakes, tarantulas, scorpions, like, things of that sort that are in the desert. And the idea from when my dad was teaching me and my brother at that moment, I guess, is like he catches a snake right from the wild. And he's like, okay, kids, I'm going to give you the snake. But keep in mind, the snake is more scared of you than you are of it. You're bigger, all of that. They only have, I guess, that attacking mechanism in their DNA when they feel threatened. So before I give you the snake, you have to like remove all the fear that you feel, because they'll sense it, they'll bite you. So I remember like being 10 years old, and I'm like, okay, taking the fear out. I'm taking the fear out. And then, okay, yeah, apa, estoy lista. He's like, you sure? Are you ready? I'm like, yeah. Gives me the snake. And the snake just crawls. And I'm like, oh, wow, I can control my fear. And we would do that with the snake, tarantula, same thing, like straight from the ground. And the whole, I guess, lesson from that was control your fear. They're more scared of you than you are of them, which we hear it. But it was a very hands-on experiment, right? And as I grew older and I say these stories, a lot of people are like, wow, that's pretty dangerous, right? And I'm like, it is. But to me, the lesson that it kind of gave me is I'm very, I consider myself that I have high emotional intelligence. Like my EQ, if I'm nervous, if I feel scared, it kind of prepared me for the real world, because in the real world, when you go out and you set out to, I don't know, in school or go to college to work, when people sense that you're scared or you're nervous, sometimes people can take that as an advantage over you. So this was like lessons that I remember, and I was below the age of 10, right? The reason why that age, I remember it a lot, is because at the point of 10, after 10 years old, I wasn't raised by both of my parents. This is actually a story that not many people know about me, because I guess I never get too deep to talking to people about my childhood, my upbringing, and stuff like that. But at 10 years old, my dad actually, he burned our house down. You know, parents are in a fight, whatever the case may be. We leave, come back the next morning, the house is burned down, right? So from that point, like, my life takes a turn. I have these lessons, you know, getting animals, and my dad is so wise in that sense. But now my parents are split up. My dad goes and does 5 years in state prison, gets deported. Like, it was obviously like a turn, like left field. So then I'm being raised now by a single mom. So I think that's a lot of where my hustle came from.
There's a lot of key points to that, and I want you to touch on it, because that's crazy. I mean, that did take a big left turn. But so walk me through those moments. Walk me through the moment the house burned down. Walk me through the moment that your parents separated and got divorced. More importantly, walk me through how that shaped you to the person that you are today. Like, the lessons that you learned through that, the moments that you went throughout all that. What did that teach you? What did you see in those phases?
Okay, so I guess at the moment that my house burns down, like, I remember we get a call and then we got to go. And to me, I took it very lightly, actually, I think, compared to my brother and my sister. Like, I remember we're standing in front of the house, and then it's devastating, right? It should be like neighbors are out, ambulance, like, it's the news channel, what is it, the Red Cross or the Blue Cross, whichever one, like charity, right? They help you. And I remember making a joke at that moment. That's something that I guess I've always had, is a very big sense of humor, even at the wrong times, right? But it lightens the mood. And I remember telling my brother and my sister in Spanish, pues bueno, al menos ya no tenemos que tocar para entrar, like, which, you know, we don't have to knock anymore, because obviously there's no door, right? And they just looked at me and we laughed. And at first, I guess it was surreal, right? I'm 10, I'm barely like digesting it all. And then it became more real, because we would go to school and it's, you know, the whispering and the pointing, like, oh, look, that's the girl, like, her dad burned her house down. And, you know, you kind of have to start developing that thick skin, because now you're 10, like, your classmates are talking about you. So I kind of learned to be like, you know, don't pay attention to them. And then I remember I saw my mom, she had to get like 2 jobs. My sister, who was a teen at that time, she had to start working too. So to me, like, everything was changing, and all of a sudden we were in survival mode, right? Because there's this home that was with 2 parents, stable, there's routine. All of a sudden you have a single mom, survival mode. Your sister's having to work, me and my brother having to stay home on our own, like, you know, feed ourselves. Well, like, try to ask for the bare minimum, like, try to not make my mom spend that much money. So I think that's kind of when, like, I started, I guess that shaped me in the way of, okay, there has to be more. There has to be more, because I would see my mom work her 8 to 5, then go work in the night, right? Like, to a bar or something. And I'm like, there's no way that this much work, like, that it has to cost this much work for it to not be enough. And not that it was enough in a bad way, because she did all she could. But then I think that's when my mind started running wild. Like, how can, you know, people get more out of life, right, than the traditional ways? So from there, in middle school, like, me and my brother, we started trying to see how we can earn money, right, at our age. Like, there was a neighbor that had an ice cream truck, see if he had it open, and like start trying to take stuff out of there and sell it, which is not a good way to do things. But it's just like, don't be a burden to your single mom. She's working hard. And how do you survive, and how do you look for more? So there was a time when I was like around my teens that sorry, I just remembered. So one way that I would make money, right, in the most innocent way I could, I had this plan, right, where I would go and I would find dogs and I would take the dog, I would wait for the reward to post, and then I would call the number, and I would have my mom take me to return the dog, and I'd split the reward with my mom. Look, so that it kind of like brought out the hustle in me, I guess.
That that's very interesting. I like how you described it in the most legal, innocent way that you can do it. But that brings out a lot of touch points. So at that point, you were a teenager. Life was taking a toll on you, your brother, your sister, your mom. The questions that I have following up to this is, where was your dad at that point? And give me your survival guide at that point. Like at that point, where were you heading?
Okay, so at that moment, I was 12. Yeah, I believe I was 12. It's crazy because I have a daughter that's 12 right now. So I hope she's not taking dogs out there. But I was 12, and my dad, he did 5 years for arson from when I was 10 to when I was 15. So he wasn't out yet. We were just kind of going through that whole motion. I was in sports. I was a straight A student, but to me, school has always been easy. Like, school to me was the easiest thing. I finished my assignments super fast, and that's maybe why I think my mind would always wander more. So I would do that, and I saw like at 12, 13 as a way to help out my mom. And then in high school, I would just be at sports. I was in freshman year JV soccer, sophomore year varsity. My dad comes out already when I'm like sophomore, junior, around there, and he's supported. Like, I go visit him. I never really held a grudge. I think I'm very. It's a little. I think now, I guess, crazy to think that I never really held a grudge. Like, we would go visit him and I'll be like, no, Dad, it's fine. Like, I get it. You got mad, right? But to me, although the consequences were so severe, right? I never had that like grudge inside of me that like poisoned me, and now I hate the world, and I can like, that was never me. So I think that's why I'm able to take situations so light, right? From when I'm younger to now. I'm like, my dad burned my house down when I was 10 years old. I grabbed snakes when I was like 8, 9 years old. Like, there's really not much that can really throw me off balance at this point.
So there's a lot I want to dig into it, but I want to move a little bit more forward and to the point to where was life at that point then afterwards, after, you started? What was your first hustle, your first venture, your first moment where it clicked to you that you were like, okay, things aren't going right.
Okay.
It's like never gonna go right. Yeah.
Well, my first hustle, we got to rewind. I was like 7 or 8. I still have both parents. My parents had this Buddha, and you put change on it and stuff like that. And you have the Mexican 10 cents, and then you have the real 10 cents. So if anybody knows the difference of the dime, the Mexican one it's wider. So it's like this. And then the US dime is way smaller. So me and my brother would go to the corner store around, but there was only Mexican dimes. So we would get the Mexican dimes and quarters and mix the change. And we had this thing where we're like, okay, we're going to trick the guy at the register that, they're real dimes. So we had this theory, right? Like, he's going to ring us up. If we count the change for him, he's going to think like, oh, it's these little kids trying to just count the change. He's going to get bored. When we're down counting, he's just going to throw it in the cash register. Boom, we take the things. And it worked. So that was probably the first hustle at 7 or 8, was just, and at that moment, I guess I had learned the mechanism of distracting somebody, putting somebody's attention or mind elsewhere for my benefit. So that was the first hustle.
You mentioned something very interesting, was that at the same time all that was happening to you, you now have a 12-year-old daughter, and now you have 2 daughters, right?
Yes. One is 12.
How are you seeing yourself through them?
Well, I think they're probably way more innocent than I am, but they are challenging. Like, I can say like, hey girls, I want you to sweep, clean the windows, and make the bed. And they'll be like, well, Mom, we should first make the bed, then clean the windows, and then sweep, because then the dirt is going to fall. And then I'll be like, Okay, yeah, that's right. The order doesn't matter. So I see that they look for I guess better ways, better outcomes. So even if I do give them like a set of orders or delegate something, they find their own way to, I guess, get it to completion. But what to them is a path of least resistance. So I see that they're witty like me. They're quick on their feet, but they're still very respectful, right? They're not like getting in trouble or anything like that. But I do allow them to explore their own mindset, like their curiosities, question things like, why is this? Why is that? But I always tell them it's not about what you say, right? It's how you say it, how you deliver it, how you approach the situation. So I think that's what they have from me. They're very meticulous.
They're very like engineerish, and like they're little engineers. Very cool. That's awesome. So at that, going back to the story, at that point, I like how you mentioned it, like the dogs and the coins. Like you were trying to do the most legal things in the most innocent way, the legally way you can. What was the first legal venture that you took?
Legal or illegal?
No, legal. I don't want to hear any illegal stories.
No, no, there's none. That's all I was saying. There's gonna be none. So legal like venture. I was 16. So when I was 16, I started working, actually, like real life working. I was in sales for Cutco knives, right? So at this point, I'm in high school. This is again another thing or story that most people don't know about me. So I was a teen mom, right? So when I was like a junior, I was already pregnant with my oldest daughter, and I decided to go to this school that is specifically for young moms because I'm gonna graduate faster. At that point, I remember I even to me that was another pivotal moment in my life. I think that moment, other than like being 10, my dad burns my house down. Now I'm 16, right, and I'm pregnant, and my whole dream and my whole aspiration in life was I wanted to play professional soccer. So obviously that's thrown out the window, and it was a very tough time for me. And I remember I would still go to practice, to varsity practice, and I would condition. And I had this idea, like I'm going to wear a big shirt and I'm still going to play. And again, I'm a kid, right? And then my body couldn't take the exercise. I kept fainting in the practices until finally I told my varsity coach, like, you know what, coach, I can't do the season. Like, this is what's going on. And at that moment, when I told my coach and I quit on what was my dream, right, back then, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a professional soccer player. That at that moment, that's whenever I just accepted it, right? And immediately I turned it to a different mode of survival, because now it's like survival plus one, right? So at that moment, I'm like, okay, I start making a plan. Like, I'm going to graduate faster. I'm going to have to do this and do that. So I started working and doing Cutco, the knives, which is commission-based job. They're stainless steel knives. They cut through rope. You can shape a penny into a butterfly and all that stuff. They never rust. And, I could probably still give you a demonstration of the knives to this day. But I remember selling the knives to my principal at the school, and I would like go knock on her principal door, right, and be like, hey, Miss Principal, like, come on, let me in. And she bought from me. So I probably didn't sell much of the knives, but a good maybe like $8,000 worth of it. And then at that point I stopped, because at 17 I had already graduated early. I was just really waiting to walk the stage with my class the next year. So selling Cutco knives, that was my first legal, I guess, entrepreneur or just sales, not even entrepreneur, right? I'm sales, and at that moment I realized that in sales, you can basically give your stuff with whatever value, depending on your effort and what you attain. Well, not even your effort, it's actually on your results, right? So that was the first legal way of me working and making money while I was a teen.
What happens next after that? What happens after you stop cutting knives? At that point, you already had your kid, right?
So yeah, at 17, I have my oldest daughter. So basically when 18 hits, I'm not going to school anymore, right? So I'm figuring out, because I'm putting applications, trying to go the traditional way, right? Like, let me apply here, let me apply there. I'm 18. Nobody's trying to hire me. At 17, I had already moved out from my mom's house. I moved out with my brother. We were living in Central here in El Paso. We were splitting a $500 a month rent. So he would pay $250, I would pay $250. I had my kids. He was just by himself. And I would it wasn't much to survive back then, right? But even then, I was trying to find a job. I would put applications, and I quickly realized nobody's gonna hire me right now. I don't have experience, my age, all of this, and I wanted more than just your typical $7, $8 an hour minimum. So my mom had told me that in Lubbock, Texas, they actually pay more if you're bilingual. So I was like, I started thinking, and I literally packed everything up, and I didn't have much, just the cribs, probably the bed, everything in a U-Haul, and I took off to Lubbock. And immediately I found an hourly job at $10 the hour beginning. It was at a call center. And I used that basically as a way to transition, right? And back then, this is 2012. So $10 the hour, and I'm 18. I'm easily probably making $2,000. I would do overtime, a rent of $600, $700. So I was pretty much clearing the whole expenses thing. And I was a single mom. But then again, it's that's not enough, right? It's not enough for me. I didn't like the work environment as far as there was too micromanagement. It was too much of the micromanaging, right? Because in this call center, I actually got promoted within 3 months to be a training supervisor, which at that point, my pay went up to $12 or $13 the hour. So I was that person that whenever people would go to a call center for a job, after the administrator does the orientation and you do all your paperwork through the state, now you're going to be trained on the account. So then here I go, I show up, I'm 18, I have red hair, mind you. My hair has been red since 2012. So my daughters were probably I don't know, one was about to be 2, the other one was 1. So they don't remember me at all, or they probably don't even recognize me without red hair. And at that moment, I'm working at this call center. I'm a supervisor. I'm training the new classes of how to do their job. But again, it's a very redundant, day in and day out and day in and day out. And it just wasn't feeding what I wanted. So at that point I'm 19 years old now, and I just pivot to car sales. And I started selling cars, commission-based in Lubbock.
That's an interesting subject to touch on, because a lot of the times I want to speak on how you got out of that job to pursue what you actually wanted to pursue after that. But I want you to touch on the perspective of a lot of people, especially people that are listening to the podcast right now, that they have this certain job that they're trying to get out of, and they need to get out of it, and it's not what they want to do. What advice would you give on that? And then explain your story on how you got out of that.
Okay, so the advice for anybody that's trying to move to another job, you're not happy where you're at. First and foremost, I think it starts with believing in yourself. And it's the most cliche thing, right? Yeah, everybody says it, but no, truly, you have to believe that you're gonna be okay and just kind of do it. And I've always been like that. I've always been a risk taker. I'm I'm rarely scared of anything, right? So I think you have to believe in yourself that you can do it. Because whenever it was that moment, right, and I'm getting paid $10 the hour, and I'm 18, and then I'm 19, and I'm getting paid $13 the hour, and now my bills are set, right, and I have everything coming in, and now I'm making the change of selling cars. I truly believe that I could make a lot more money selling cars, because I've always believed that I have what it takes. And I feel people are underpaid. Let me just put that out there. I feel like the potential that people have are that causes them to be underpaid. So I always thought, even when I was getting paid hourly for those 2 years, which is probably the only time in my life I got paid hourly, I felt like that wasn't my value. So I was kind of eager to get out of it and show how much my value is. So to me, it was a challenge. Okay, so for every car I sell, I make 20% of the net profit. So then I'm okay, so I'm challenging myself. Okay, so if I sell 5, it's this, so on and so forth. So now I'm basically future pacing myself, and that's what worked for me. But to me, it was a challenge to really prove. And to me, when I did the switch to selling cars, I remember clear as day, it's the interview, right? And they're asking, they're telling me the hours and everything. And they come back to the point and they're going to say they're going to hire me. And I'm like, okay. And at that point I say, but I have one question and I have one request. Like, I want my lunchtime to be at a certain time because my daughters are going to start going to like Head Start here soon. And I want to be able to pick them up and then drop them off to the daycare. And if it's holidays and the daycare is closed, either I want the days off or I want my daughters to come to work with me. And I remember they were like, yeah, okay. So since I realized that whenever you're in sales and you're the one that's bringing in the revenue, you have more leverage, right? And more leverage to give you and yourself your place, but most importantly, include your kids. Because my thing was, I never wanted to be like the person where, yeah, I work hard, I work a lot, but then my kids are like, but we never see you or we don't know what you're doing. So I involve my kids, like, this is what I'm doing. And they have to, at that moment when I'm 19, they have to be able to be a part of my job, go to the dealership, or I'm taking the day. So, but that's just a very bold move on my side. But again, I was raised being bold. I was raised like, get that scorpion, get that tarantula. Oh, house burns down. Okay, now we got to do this. Now we got to do that. So I was raised on survival mode.
I clearly remember, and to give you a little bit of I guess like what I've done as far as the research, and I remember that you've always had your kids around you. And when we were working back at that company, you always had your kids there with you and stuff like that. They were always with you. Now, when I was doing my research, I always saw that in every photo, your kids were always there supporting every company with the gear on and stuff like that. You always had them teaching them something. There's two questions to this, and there's two parts that I want to touch on this, and I want you to kind of explain it in deepest way that you can. Is having your kids around, what are you really trying to teach them? What are you really trying for them to take a grab of? And then what was your definition of success then? What is your definition of success now?
Okay, so I guess having my kids around, I always wanted to give them an example, right? Like, I basically, there's one thing for me to say, hey, I'm going to work to bring, the food back to the table. And what another thing for me to show them, right? So when my kids see me in a work environment, like, they have this, they get to see this whole different perception of me. And I feel like it just opens up their mind, like, and they've seen this from like the car dealerships to when I was selling solar to when I co-founded Minsky to like from everything. They've been able to see like the evolution of myself as a professional, from going just from a salesperson to an entrepreneur to a businesswoman. So they see the evolution not only like on a personal level or being their mom. So to me, that's me talking to their subconscious mind. I'm not just saying, hey, you guys need to be great and go to school and do that. I'm saying like, look, you see, like, I've been showing you how to do it. And subconsciously, they talk in like terms of, oh, they just recently, they're like, okay, mom, when your company is making more profit, can I get 2 solos instead of 1? So they're very conscious about what it takes of a business. And I guess on your second question, what my definition of success was before to what it is now. I guess before success, I define success as like you make it, right? You're just comfortable making, you have, before success to me was like, you have a house to put over the roof of your kids. You're comfortable, basically. That was my definition of success, where you're comfortable enough to just say, okay, like, this is good. Now my definition of success has changed, and success to me is like more of a repetitive cycle. Like, now I'm wanting to be able to do different projects, get different, throw different ideas or projects and companies out into the world that actually give a long-term return. So now my success is mainly focused on how can I start something, leave it running, go to the next thing. There's a lot of problems in this world, right? And I feel like that's something that I've always been a problem solver. Like, I found, I think years ago, me and my friend were out at a bar and some guy lost his truck, and I helped him find his truck. Like, I will stop the whole night of drinking because now I'm going to help you find your truck. Like if I see a problem, I'm going after it. Like I'm gonna solve it. So now success is just solving problems over and over and over again.
And I definitely see that when I see you working and the stuff that you're posting and these new companies you're founding. I want to start touching on a big conversation that I think we definitely need to have, because you earlier you used the word cliche and how people say that, you know, you didn't believe in yourself and that's kind of cliche. Tell me about the stigmas about solar.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of stigmas, right? I guess first we got to define stigma, right? So stigma is the way that somebody thinks about something in a negative light, right? So the stigmas around solar, just to kind of rewind, I started in the solar industry in 2019, right? After I was selling cars, I got recruited. Hey, there's this new product. It's solar. My background is all sales. And I'm like, okay, I'm already on commission base. I've been commission based for most of my life. Now I'm just changing the product. So when I started in solar, I didn't realize the stigma because I'm out there trying to train for the first month and, oh, swap your electric bill for your solar plan, so on and so forth. But as the years have gone by, right now, I think the stigma in solar is very, very present. You've heard stories, right, of people that it goes very well. California, which is the leading state in anything environment, ecology, they're all for, you know, save the turtles and no straws and no paper, no plastic bags and solar. So then other states are trying to adapt, such as Texas, such as whatever's east of California, right? But I think the stigma lies around the lack of educational standard that's in the industry. Like the barrier to get into solar is non-existent. You want to start selling, you can start tomorrow, which can be good because on one side, it can create jobs, right? But on the other side, it could create a lot of problems if people are not being properly educated on how to size the system, how to choose the correct financial product for the consumer. So I think that's what's kind of caused this stigma of just poorly executed sales, in short.
Let's play a scenario here, and I want people to really understand, because I remember that one time we were at that gallery and you explained it to me. It really made a lot more sense on the actions that you were trying to take and how everything can really work. So I want to play a scenario here. Let's say I'd say, hey, Xochitl, I think solar is a scam. I think solar is a waste of money. You know, I'm going to lose a lot. I don't believe in it. You're trying to sell to me. Don't explain to me what the benefits of the solar is, but explain to me the changes that you're going to be making with the mission that you're on.
Okay, so solar, to start off with, is it's very circumstantial, right? There's a lot of moving parts. First and foremost, I think everybody needs to understand that solar is a sophisticated purchase. Why is it a sophisticated purchase? Well, because other than you, creating a committing to 20, 25 years, if you're financing, you're also going to have to decide, start seeing if you're going to qualify for the tax credit, start thinking in the future. Do you plan on selling your home? Is it going to cut into your equity? Are you just going to transfer? Are you in the zip code where there's actually value being given to the rooftop solar? So what it is, I like to use this example, and I think I use it with you, Isaac. Right now, this is what's happening in the solar industry right now. Isaac, you have a neighbor, right? And your neighbor's name is Maria. And you go to your neighbor and you're like, hey, Maria, everybody's been knocking my door and I think I'm going to get solar already. How is your experience with solar? And then Maria says, you know what, Isaac, I hate it. I hate it because since the beginning of time that they installed it, I still have another bill. My breakers have been messing up. The salesperson doesn't answer me. My install company went bankrupt. The electric company won't help me. And the finance company wants me to make my payment on time every month. So then now you're spooked, right? Now you don't want to buy solar because your neighbor, which is supposed to be a testimony to the purchase, gave you a bad experience. So what do you do now? You're at work. Your coworker tells you, hey, Isaac, my wife just called me and we have a solar appointment today. What have you heard? And then Isaac just repeats what Maria told him. So obviously your coworker is like, I don't think I want to take a chance, right? So then the coworker calls the wife and says, hey, wife, cancel the appointment. And that goes on. And this is a cycle that's happening time after time after time. Right now, there's no actual statistics on how many people are happy with solar and how many people are unhappy with their purchase, right? And we all have to understand the technology is proven. The product is proven. Yes, NASA, the military, and all these big corporations have been utilizing solar power for decades. But what is the difference between those type of companies, NASA, Apple, Amazon, the military, and the average American? And the answer to that is advisors, right? So whenever you're going to go to sell anything to a base or to Apple, you present what you want to sell them. They're literally going to do a cash flow projection and see if it makes sense. They're going to check out the design. They're going to take some thought to it. What's happening right now in residential solar is a salesperson goes to your home. You don't know anything about solar energy. You don't know what to look out for. And you don't know if that person that's helping you was trained right from their company. And because there's no certification standard, no educational standard, no association, no regulatory agency, the risk is huge, right? So a lot of the times, I don't believe that it's necessarily intentional. I think it's truly that the people that are selling don't properly do the design because they lack that education. They probably don't understand financial products to the extent of, is the lease better? Is the purchase better? What about an interest rate? Or what is this going to do to my homeowner if they buy solar? I give them $10,000 worth of landscape, $10,000 worth of HVAC. I put a roof for $15,000. Obviously, there's going to be no savings, right? But there's no actual like cash flow projection or if there's going to be a return on investment, if they're going to do savings. It's just based off of this illusion, I want to say, of your electric bill gets replaced with solar, but it doesn't. There's so many components. If you're counting on the federal tax credit that's 30% right now, that must mean that you can only apply if you pay taxes, right? If you don't pay taxes, the government's not going to give you any credit at all. This is not like the child tax credit. So I think it's so much, and then homeowners don't even get the subject doesn't get touched on what if you're going to move. If I buy solar right now and I want to move in 6 months, now guess what? I just have a liability on top of my house. I either have to transfer that loan or I have to absorb that debt through my equity. So did I even think of that? So I feel like right now these decisions are being taken in a very rushed manner. Why is it that this is the second largest purchase that the average American is going to make in their life, but yet they're having to make this decision in 30 minutes to an hour at their kitchen table from a person that's not certified?
This is like a, so my question after that would be, if you were describing this to me, we understand the problem. We understand all the terms and everything that somebody can do. We understand the process of it. But to me, if a solar agent were to come to me and pitch me all this, the first thing that would go into my mind would be, man, they're just trying to really confuse me and they're just trying to sell me a lot of stuff I don't understand. At this point, where does Solar Reset come in? What are the solutions that you have for this?
Yeah, definitely. So the Solar Reset Initiative, it's a Texas-based nonprofit organization, and this barely came to be as of a few months ago. As of a few months ago, I've been in the solar industry for 4 years now, and I've seen projects everywhere, like Texas, New Mexico, Carolinas, Florida, like Arizona. I've seen projects come and go through a system, and that's what's led me to be like, wow, there's a problem, there's complaints. So the Solar Reset Initiative, what it's meant to do, it's just that, right? I want to hit the reset button on the industry. Let's be honest, right? This was a new product, a new industry, and there was a lot of mistakes made, like with anything that's new. If I start trying to be a roofer tomorrow, I'm gonna mess up a couple of roofs before I perfect my craft, right? So I want to hit the reset button, and it's a two-part solution process. The first part is very reactive, right? Because I want to do damage control. I want to say, hey, Who out here already has solar and does not feel like they're getting the full benefits of solar? What? Reach out to us. Let's see how we can help you. So part one, I want to make it right. I want to rectify any past mistakes that the industry as a whole did, because it's not just one person or two people. It's a team effort, right? And the second part is a very proactive solution, which I want to start pushing for an educational standard when it comes to anybody that's gonna be out there promoting solar. So that's actually already underway. On that note, I can't go too much into depth about it. But then what I also see on for the consumers is that I want the average American to know how to purchase solar. Like, I want to normalize the purchase to the core. For example, the average American right now, they have a notion on how to buy a car. You have bad credit, you know where the bad credit lots are in your city, right? You have good credit, you know that you can go to the franchises. You have an idea if you're going to need a down payment. There's going to be an interest rate. I cannot trade my car in. You have a notion. You know what the process looks like. You're going to need insurance for your vehicle. So that's normalized. Now let's think about real estate. The average American also knows the process of how to buy a home. Like, not knows the process, but they have a notion. If I'm a first-time buyer, I know, okay, I need a realtor. Let me find a realtor. Also, I think that my property is supposed to make me money, equity they call it. There's taxes. I'm going to need a large down payment. So you go and you talk to the realtor, right? And they guide you. When it comes to solar, the confusion is through the roof. People are like, solar? Wait, I've heard that for John Doe, it went great. And over here, Mary, it went bad. And they said it was a scam, but they love it. And the tax credit, what is that? So do you get it? Do you not? What about the roof? So, and there's like it's a whole can of worms, right? And although it is a sophisticated purchase, it doesn't have to be hard, right? It could be simplified. So I want to start, I have started already pushing like towards consumers of things that they should look out for, which is very simple, right? If the idea is for your electric bill to replace your solar bill to replace your electric bill, you would just have to make sure that when you're being presented, that the proposal reflects your consumption correctly, right? The panels, you have to double check all of that. And it's just numbers, a comparison of numbers. What I think that people should do is I think people should take some time to review that proposal, check the numbers, make sure that their usage that they gave to the agent reflects the usage that they put in the system. And I think they also need to double check that if the federal tax credit is being factored, like if they're going to get it, that tax credit is 30%, right? So if it's 30% of your total system price, but you don't qualify for it, it's safe to say that you're going to be paying 30% more. So check those numbers out. And so on that proactive solution, other than pushing for the educational standard, it's pushing for pre-purchase education. Everybody should do their homework before. There is some companies that we partner with that are trusted in the community so that they can go to them. But the idea is ultimately people need to be certified one way or another. And it doesn't have to be the most difficult process. It just has to be teaching salespeople how to actually pitch this product. So it does not affect a homeowner. Because even if it's 1 out of 10 people, that one person that got affected, it changed the course of their life potentially for 20, 25 years. I've seen projects where it's a 75-year-old man that just signed for a $40,000 loan. And in 25 years, he's going to be 100, right? That's if he lives to be 100, which not many people do, right? This is a Latino man. What if everybody who knows like Latino older generations, when they come over here to the States, their thing is come over here, the American dream, get a house and live debt free. So imagine that man, all he had to dream for is to be debt free, and he got stuck in a 25-year loan at the age of 75, and he basically passes away with that loan. That could be so hard on him as on his emotion if that was all he lived for in his life, for his house and to be debt free. And these are like extreme cases that I see, and then some cases are more less extreme, right? But the consequences are so, like they're so long term that it's crazy that nobody's doing nothing about it.
One of the things that I really like about it, though, is that it's a nonprofit. So you know that right off the bat, hearing it that it's a nonprofit, you're not in it to take money out of people. You're not in it for any of the monetary. You're in it for the educational side. That's what I really loved about it. That's what solar doesn't need to be an enemy word. It doesn't need to be something that's like, as soon as you hear it, you're like, stay away from it, right? Because one thing that you explained to me was that there's guidelines for solar companies, there's guidelines for consumers. Once those are met, then you can look into getting solar. Now that changes everything now, because now you're not just being sold and thinking it's a scam. Now there's no excuse to say that it's going to be a scam. It's going to say, hey, you got to get certified first to 100% guarantee that you're not going to get scammed, because there's no way to get scammed after you certify the companies and you certify the consumers. Yeah.
Right. And if we think about the word scam, like the definition actually is a dishonest scheme, right? So a lot of the times I feel, I think like it's half and half. Half of the people may purposely be deceitful, because I have heard and seen cases where people will tell the homeowners or whomever that this is a government program. And if people are older and they believe in government help, they're going to fall for it, right? So, but I think that the other half of the industry is just not educated. They want to do right, but just because they haven't been taught, they're accidentally putting people in a bad position. So my aim with Solar Reset Initiative, hit that reset button on the reputation and basically break the stigma from the word solar. Because it's like, I remember when I first started selling solar, I'm at a family gathering. Oh, Xochitl, what are you doing now? Oh, I'm selling solar. It's almost like I told them I was selling drugs, because now they're like, oh, you're one of those guys, you know? And this is how a lot of people feel. So now people are like, oh, well, now I do home improvement, right? So, which is another thing, because the solar industry, it has taken a hit in adoption and sales. Consumer resistance is at an all-time high. So now solar professionals are finding other ways, right? Which again, the ones that are doing it for the right reasons, this message is not really relative to them. But the ones who didn't do it for the right reasons kind of, left a bloody path for the rest of the world. So I'm just trying to go, and it's like, this is the Titanic. We're going against an iceberg, and I'm trying to turn the whole ship around before there's a lot of people that are stuck in these 20, 25-year loans. They have two options, right? If you signed a loan and you're not happy, you either suck it up and you keep paying it and you basically hit your financials, or you decide to say, you know what? No, they scammed me, right? I'm going to stop paying. But now you default on your system. Now your credit is shot. Now you have a UCC1 filing. I'm sure there's people out there that have these type of problems, and that's who we're looking for to help, right? We're looking to help them because solar is a good thing. The product, the technology is good. Is it for everybody? No. Is it a slippery slope? Yes, because it should be designed the right way, taking conscious decision. And more importantly, I think it's a financial decision, the one that you're taking. Like, are you absolutely sure this is going to save you money? If you're doing it because it saves you money. If you're not doing it because it saves you money, if you're doing it because you love the environment and you want to remodel your whole house and you're fine with paying double, great. But just know what you're getting yourself into. And I think that we can agree that the average American doesn't financially plan for the next 5 years, let alone the next 3 years. So how can you make a 20, 25-year long-term decision on a financial product, right? And I have a theory, which is what I'm out to prove right now. I think that this is on that the people, that the consumers that have these problems, right? They feel scammed. They're not saving money. They're not getting the benefit. I feel they belong to a certain demographic. I think that it's minorities, right? Whether Mexican, Latinos in general, Blacks, anything. I believe that they're minorities. I believe that it's people that maybe their household income doesn't exceed a certain amount. Maybe it's even people that have nothing higher than a high school diploma or some college. I know that there's a profile, because I don't think that this is a problem nationwide against all the demographics. I think it's a certain one. So once with the data that we collect, that we prove where the problem lies, that's who we're going to be speaking to. And if it's minorities, we can all agree that as minorities, I mean, the household that I grew up in, it's never really talking about money or investment or none of that. So how can we make those decisions if it was never embedded in us, right? Unless you went to college and started, figuring it out, or self-teaching, right? But I don't think that that's the type of people that are being quote unquote screwed over. The ones that are minorities.
So the last two questions that I have for you is, the first one is, if you can describe yourself in 3 words, or if you would like to have people remember you or know you as 3 certain things, what would those 3 words or statements be to describe yourself that you want people to know about you or to see you as?
Wow. Okay. So I would say number 1, courageous, right? Resilient and resourceful.
I like that. And so our closing tradition here for this last question is that we usually have our last guest leave a guest for our next guest, not knowing who the next guest is going to be. And so our last guest, they left this question for you. And I think this is honestly really an interesting question that they left because of the backstory that you gave us. And so the question is, are you doing what you can to teach people how to light the candle or to light that switch within them?
I think to light the switch within them. This reminds me of Michael Burden's book, Flip the Switch, right? Which I've always said, like, I think that desire beats motivation. So to me, I feel like I have a burning desire inside of me that keeps me going. So I think that that's the switch inside of me. So I think that everybody should know themselves, figure out what makes them tick, what makes them go, what makes you not care, right? That you have to put in extra hours or miss out on that party and do something that is relevant to that. Like for me, it was problem solving. So now I'm trying to solve the biggest problem that I see in one industry.
Before I let you go, I know Daniel usually has some questions, kind of like behind the scene questions, things that maybe I haven't asked. So I don't know, Daniel, if you're still there, if you have anything that you might want to ask.
I do. I have a few questions. I think I'm going to start from beginning to end. One thing that stood out to me a lot is you said that when you were 10 and your house got burned down, you didn't get angry. And I would like to ask about that, right? You're 10 years old, your house is gone, your things are gone, your dad's, going to jail, your mom's now becoming a single parent. Why not choose to get angry? Why do you choose to look at it in a positive way? How do you do
that? So I think it kind of comes, first and foremost, I obviously love my dad, always loved him. And I kind of like, to me, my dad was so wise and his lessons were like so out, like from left field, out of this world. So I just knew there was there must be I guess I accepted people's flaws early on. Like nobody can be completely perfect. So when he did that, I'm like, wow, that sucks, right? That's bold. You basically leave your family in the street. But I was like, hey, I'm not perfect. Who am I to point the finger? And I don't know what, I guess, I think that's part of my upbringing is my parents were always like, you're not perfect. Don't point the finger. Like we all are imperfect. So that was just how I approached it. And I don't know why, just my response.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. I think that if a 10-year-old was put in your situation nowadays, it would be a little bit different. But that's very trying to find the right word. I guess, amazing, astonishing that a 10-year-old um, just kind of sees all this, and she's like, okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, so that was my first one. The second one is a little bit, I guess you could say, odd. Kind of, you said you had two daughters, and that you went through school and you were a teen mom. And so this is more of the, I guess, school, because you said school was very easy for you. So as you went to school, school was easy for you, and now you see your daughters going through school and finishing school. How do you think the school system has changed from when you went to school to nowadays in school? Do you think it's gotten better? Do you think it's maybe taken a few steps back? Is it the same? What is your point of view on that?
Okay, so I know this is like a hot topic, right? This is like a trending topic always, like the educational system, and they don't teach you this in school in the real life, and that's not the direction I'm going to go with this at all. But I guess first off, I don't know what the school system is like today because I'm not there, and I rely on my daughters a lot for them to do their own work. What I do know is that what I instill in my daughters, I still think it should be easy, right? There's a reason why people don't disagree with the school system because it doesn't teach you enough. So with that being said, my daughters, it's been times where my daughters come home and they're like, "Oh, my teacher, she's not a good teacher, and she didn't explain this." And I'll tell my daughters, "Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's think about it." So even if your teacher is not a good teacher or you don't think she's a good teacher, it's still your education, right? So you're giving the textbook, you're giving the questions, you have a phone, so you can self-teach. Right. So you should not let one teacher in 6th grade or 7th grade determine how smart you're going to be the rest of your life. And then, like, I literally tell them like that. And they're like, okay. So what I do think is about teachers, though. I feel like teachers are not passionate anymore. Maybe not all, right? Like, don't come after me for this comment, but at least the ones that I've experienced with my daughter, sometimes I'm like, my daughters will come and they're like, "Oh yeah, my teachers make these comments." And I'm like, wow, they're making comments like that to 10-year-olds, to 11-year-olds. So the only thing that I can do is I can protect my household and raise my household. So as all these, I guess, flaws in the school system come to be, I teach my daughters how they can not be like swayed by them and how you're in control. The power is in your hands. It's your education. It's there. Your teacher likes to yell. You don't like your tone of voice. Well, you learn it. You come home from school, you Google it, right? Because you can't use your phone in school. So to me, I guess, again, not that I take it lightly, but I approach it in a very solution-focused way. Like, I'm not going to sit there and complain about your teacher with you, right? This is to my daughter. Like, I'm not going to indulge in that. More so, you need to figure out how you can make up for what you think is lacking from your teacher. So that's how I kind of push my daughters forward is it's on you. You're accountable, not them. Plus, it's free school, right? Which I've considered homeschooling and all that.
And I like that. I like that a lot because I myself am not a high school graduate. I left school early, got my GED, and then continued on to college. And the answer is right on to something I was talking with some friends of mine. Do you think, this was leading on to the next part of that question, do you think that kids nowadays have it the same morals, the same bringing up, I guess, that you had or the older generation had about right and wrong and, respecting the elders and things like that? Do you think those morals, as technology progresses and everything becomes so much easier, like you said, your phone, you just grab your phone, you go on YouTube, you learn how to become, multi-millionaire, with all these different platforms that are teaching kids so much stuff? Do you think that those same old school, hey, be tough, get out there, don't be scared, like you said, you grab, spiders and scorpions and you were raised, like a toughness. Do you think nowadays kids are being raised the same way?
So I guess it depends, right? Because to answer that question, we got to like kind of rewind and let's start from like 2 generations ago, like my parents, they taught my parents something, right? Whether my parents decided to stick with it and pass it on to me was a decision they had, right? When my parents taught me, whether I decided to stick with it and pass it on to my kids, that's my decision. So whatever the generation is, this generation, like this, I don't know the generation names, but whatever kids are between the ages of 1 to the 17 years old, that generation, however they are, is directly responsible of their parents, which was like people my generation. So is it really them or is it us, right? That's what I think, because they're not raising themselves. And if they are, well, then that's the problem too. So that's, I guess that's not a very clear answer, but these kids are not raising themselves. So who's the providers? Who's like my daughter called me one time, she said her trusted adult. Who are the trusted adults that are in charge of these kids, and are they passing on like these core values of respect to elders? Because if they're not, then they're not going to know to stick with it. I mean, people don't know what they don't know, and you as a parent need to challenge your kids' perspective and change it to where they don't fall into the norms of society, right? Because that's another topic in its own. These kids pass like or go through the whole day with a bunch of other kids that are raised differently, and some are rotten apples and some are good apples. And how does your kid like basically keep their integrity from what you've taught them? Well, that directly relates to you as a parent. So this is where I take the approach of going back to my like survival of the fittest. Like, to me, I see it like, are you going to put your kids at the top of the food chain or not, right? Are you going to show them how to not fall into these bad ways of being of this generation, or are you going to let them kind of be easily swayed? Well, it's up to you as a parent. So I know as for me and my household, we're going to be at the top of the food chain. I don't know about the rest.
I love that. I have just one last question. And again, thank you for taking the time to, answering these. The last one is, you said something that really touched on. You were talking about the solar companies, and then you made a reference to, you mess up a roof when you first start making roofs or filling roofs. I'm in the construction, so I know, mistake happens and things like that. And it's hard to come back since after, your trade kind of messes up. You have to that name. You know that, hey, they messed up. You're willing to give them another chance, but they're on thin ice. It's where I see it. So translating that over to the solar business, you said something that really resonated. And there needs to be a training. There needs to be some certification that kind of that they know what they're doing, what they're selling, right? Good salesperson knows exactly what they're selling and the product that they're selling. Being that, do you think that it's wise to go out there and sell solar without and you might have asked this, I'm sorry, but you think it's wise to go out there and sell solar and, like you said, sell it to these, older gentlemen that might get caught on something that they might not really truly understand? And do you think it's right for just a bunch of salesmen people to go out there without truly understanding what they're selling and what exactly they're getting these customers into?
So I don't think it's wise for people to go and sell anything that they don't fully know. But I do think that, like, if anybody does want to jump into the solar industry, I feel like they would need to make sure that they're part of a company that's going to give them the correct training, that has, I guess, a good structure for them. How you identify the company? Well, that's the tough part, right? Because the way that the professionals get lured into the industry, and I'm even speaking for myself, to me, it was like, hey, the commissions are this high, and my background is sales, so I jumped to it. But then it has to come from, like, it takes a lot for somebody to be like, hey, I don't think that I'm comfortable with what's going on. I don't understand it fully, so I'm not gonna go sell it. What I think is happening is that what I do, people should stay away from people that are older and retired to an extent, right? Unless that person knows about solar, unless you're gonna fully teach them. But let's be honest, right? Let's put all the cards on the table. Elderly people or people that are older, they're more easy to deceive. They're more easy to sway. That is not a surprise. So if you're going to get in it for the right reasons, go with the company that's already established. Go with the company that will tell you, hey, our deal client for solar pays an average of $150 on the bill. They have an average annual income of $70,000 because that will put their tax liability at, I don't know, $6,000, and they can get the tax credit in 4 years or whatever the case may be, right? Somebody that actually shows you like that. But if you're telling you, hey, well, just go and tell them it's a government program and it's just going to replace it and for them not to worry about it and there's no upfront cost, or even worse, right? These contracts are in English. And if you're just having somebody sign off and they don't know English, and all of a sudden this 85-year-old woman signed a DocuSign in 37 seconds, yeah, I don't think that's right. So it's a very slippery slope, and it's easy to get caught into this wheel of money that now, because you see that there's money on the table, you're willing to turn a blind eye, right? Because you're like, so don't get caught into that. Like, just stick to your core values. Think about if that was your family, they're doing it too. And again, it doesn't always have to be painted in a bad narrative. And this is not the whole industry, but even the small percentage that it is, these are 20, 25-year long-term consequences. So it matters a lot.
I love that. The reason why I was asking that is I used to sell life insurance right after the pandemic, and it was extensive. We had instant exams and a lot of stuff to really understand and learn before we're out there handling people's life practically, and that's the reason why I asked that. I'd like to ask just one last question. I promise this is the last one. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
This is a question that I always like to think about or reflect on for myself, and I've asked Isaac and I've asked people, but I read your story, looking positive, from an early age when things got tough, and I guess the question I would ask is there anything that from start of life till now that you would change or you would go back to a different outcome? Is there something I guess you regret that happened or that you didn't do that you would go back and change?
So yes, actually, I know most people might be like, no, I wouldn't change nothing. No, there's probably one thing that I would go back and change. So around the time that my dad gets, out of prison, and now I have at this point I'm pregnant, right? And I'm having, or it's a couple years later, whatever. I have my kids, and I move out of town when I was in Lubbock. I remember he used to call me, and he used to be like, no, mija, that this and that, you don't come visit me. And I would be like, well, Dad, I'm out here trying to make a living for my daughters. And I didn't go visit him, right? Because at that moment, I obviously will put myself and my daughters first. And I straight up told him, at the moment when you took that decision, I didn't take it to heart, but you didn't really care what happened with us, right? And right now, I'm looking out for my kids, and you're grown and you're out, and pues, como dicen, ráscate con tus propias uñas. And I think that maybe that was a little bit too tough. So, and then shortly after he passed away. So I guess the only thing that would have changed is probably going to go visit him more, because at that moment, life is only so much, right?